Okay, so I'd like to introduce you to Barbara Schilling, who has an emerging level mentorship group that starts in May. And Barbara worked as a restoration artist and conservator for over 35 years. And now retired from restoration, she's been spending her time on her own art. As an oil painter, her work has been strongly influenced by the bold impressionist art of the contemporary Russian painters. As a result, her own painting has become bolder and more expressionistic. Barbara says, painting to me is about capturing the energy of a subject. I love strong textures, thick paint, and vibrant colors. That's what drew me. I searched to find a balance between the abstract and the representational. I love the tactile feel of pushing thick paint around and layering juxtaposing color notes. I've moved away from a more literal translation of my subject to a more emotional response. Barbara is a signature member of Oil Painters of America and American Impressionist Society. And again, I'm going to say that Barbara's emerging level mentorship group starts Thursday, May 9th, and it's going to be the second Thursday of every month. And we would love to have anyone join us. And Barbara, you were just going to tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Oh, well, you covered it all pretty good. Really, I think at this point, what I'd more like to discuss is what I hope to bring to the mentorship class. A lot of people have expressed that what they're really drawn to in my work is that the heavy textures, the bold brushwork, and so on. So that is something that I definitely want to bring into this whole mentoring process. But I want to start with some of the more foundations before we get into that deeply. And that doesn't mean square one. It's not that we're starting back here on the beginning steps of how to mix paint, but I think that there is a more sophisticated level of all of those things, especially understanding color and how it works, that most artists, even those that have been painting for some time, really have not learned a lot of these elements about color and working with color. So that's kind of what I really want to focus at in the beginning, and working with each of you and seeing kind of where you're at, what level you are on, and meeting you on that level. So starting out, it's going to be kind of hitting what I consider the four elements of color that are really important. And that is getting into one of the hardest ones, I think, seeing color as a value. We all understand how important a value structure is in a painting, but it is easy enough to comprehend that or see that visually when you're working in a grayscale, but it's a whole lot harder to see what value that yellow is, or that red is, or the green that you're pulling out and putting into your painting. So I want to hit on that a little bit and just kind of see where everybody is at, again, within the group, in kind of making that, doing perhaps even a few exercises and so on that end of it, to sort of improve our skills in learning how to see that value. The value is so important in the composition and the structure of a painting, and yet it is one of the most challenging things, especially I find for artists that tend to work from photo references, because photos do not tend to give you true and accurate value structures when you start trying to translate them onto your work. So that's going to be one of the things. Another element is the temperature. And a lot of times with impressionistic work also, for those of you that are interested in that, which is a big part of my foundation as an artist, is the impressionism, although a little bolder, more contemporary bend to it, I think. But the temperature is a huge thing. Your temperature's finding and understanding how your cools and your warms work within your paintings, and being able to kind of judge and determine what those cools and warms are with each individual color. Clearly, we all know red is warm and blue is cool, but what we need to also recognize when we are painting is that we need to be able to see and have some control over, let's say, a warm blue and a cool blue, or a cool red and a warm red, because we need to get those color adjustments, and so in order to create the dimensionality and even the depth in our work. So that is an important part of it. Let's see, I get talking and I forget where I'm at. um, Lost and found edges is another big thing that I want to be sure to hit on. That again is something that is very important in helping to kind of minimize the information that we're trying to put down, so that we are finding the most important elements within our painting, the focal point, however you want to call it or look at it, the energy that you're trying to convey, the message you're trying to send. And using lost and found edges can be huge in helping to kind of tell the story of your painting and draw the viewer to your focal point. So, those are some of the things that I'm really wanting to focus on to begin with on the group. And really, I think, depending on where the group is at as a whole, that could take us several sessions, or we could go through it very quickly. So that's kind of where I'm starting. And one other point also, and this is really important to me, again, with the Impressionism and working with really bold sort of alla prima work, is that you know how to mix beautiful grays. And that is something I really want to spend some time on. If you study the Russian Impressionists at all, you will see that much of their paintings, if you really look at it, and sometimes it's really deceptive, but much of their painting is in very neutral or gray tones. And then they'll suddenly put that pop of color in somewhere, and it just kind of jumps off the page because it is the only really intense color within the whole canvas. So I want to work with you on how to kind of push and pull those grays and those neutrals to use them to your benefit within your painting. So but I also am a very strong believer in individuality as an artist. I think that is the most important thing. And any instructor that perhaps tries to train another artist to paint the way that they are really doing the artists a disservice. I think we all, to some degree, need to find our own voice and our own way of painting. So a big part of what I hope to bring to the program is helping you individually work with your style, whether it's a style that you are thinking you'd like to try, or something that you feel is really established or just almost innate even in your work. Doesn't matter. Sometimes we have to experiment a little before we really get comfortable with finding what really fits for us. But yeah,
well,
so
that sounds great. And one of the things that Barbara does, and she spends a lot of time doing, are the critiques. And she takes your work and spends time really looking at it and working through it. And that's what she's going to demo for us tonight. We're very grateful for the people, the artists who have provided their work tonight for us to share. And Barbara is going to go through a few critiques this evening. We are going to ask that if you have questions that you write them down in the chat or something, and we'll try to answer them at the end, because Barbara wanted to make sure that she gets through the artists all fairly and makes sure that she covers the information for them.
Yes, thank you, Karen. And typically within the session, we may very well kind of talk as I'm going along doing the critique, but tonight that's going to be a little bit different. So shall I go ahead then, Karen?
Yes, please do.
Enjoying the video? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when new Mastrius videos are added.
Let's get started.
Let me share screen then, and I will work with the Photoshop and show you. Now, the first piece that I opened up here, can you all see what I have pulled up here?
Yes.
Yes, Kim?
Yeah.
Okay. This first piece does belong to Kim. And so I appreciate you sending it in, Kim. It's a beautiful painting. One of the things that I feel is the most important element in art is the emotion that you are conveying. I think there is nothing that is more important than having your painting speak to someone, and that is something that I also want to bring to the program, is some of the different ways of being able to do that within your work. This painting is very dramatic, and it has just a really strong, bold feel to it, and I think very successful. With that being said, there are some things that I would suggest in ways that I might work with it to make it an even stronger piece, or at least in my opinion, a stronger piece. And everything is kind of subjective in art, so we'll bear that in mind too. And also want to kind of make a little bit of a caveat here that working with Photoshop and making changes and adjustments are not going to look exactly as it would look if you were painting it and making the adjustments. But this will give you an idea of just what some of the changes, how it can make your painting look differently. On your painting, the first thing that popped out to me, Karen, and I'm going to zoom in on your painting, although I will lose a little bit of the dimension of it here when I do that. But one of the first things that I noticed is your edges are pretty sharp. And here is where I would suggest that you kind of gear yourself towards working a little bit more with those lost and found, those hard and soft edges. And a big part of that that I am seeing is in that muscle structure within the horses. They're very, very sharp edges here. And if you look at your photo reference, you do not have that. These are very soft, very blended sort of edges. You don't want them to feel as if they are a solid cutout shape. You want them to have more of a gentle turning or form, like they're rounded off. Yes, they are a hard muscular animal, but the muscles are still not going to be like these sharp defined edges. They're going to still have more softness to the edges. So that is the first thing that I saw in the painting. And here is what I did with some of those edges. See how you still have all of your same shape, your same form is in there. You've got the light and the shadow all happening, but now those edges are much softer and more rounded down. They're not as harsh and as hard in the shape. And the same is true not only within the form of the horses themselves, but even within your cloud areas where you don't want your edges to be too sharp. You want to also try to bring your focus more up towards the to me, these three horses here are your main focus. So what is happening, because you've created some really strong, sharp edges back in here, is that we're really competing with that subject. So if we soften these edges back in here, then the horses are going to stand out even more as being the point that are going to draw the interest and bring in someone's eye. So this is where we get that softness happening. even within sort of the background, your tree line in the back, softened some of the clouds, just kind of softened a lot of the edges throughout to kind of push that background back. And so, you know, your horses then stand out a little bit more in the background. Now, the next thing that I would look at would be the temperature, your warm and cools. Your cool colors tend to go back, particularly on something that has as much atmosphere as this painting does. You're looking through a lot of atmosphere in the air when you are looking over a canyon or a cloudy day into a mountain and so on like that. So we want to really cool those colors off so that we can push them back even further and make, again, our horses stand out even more. So in doing that, I brought it up to here. Now see the horses here now are almost standing, are almost standing in a light source of their own. See how I have kept these areas right here all immediately around the horses much lighter, and then I have toned things down. Even your grasses here, I have cooled them off. I've softened them a little bit, and even darkened them a little bit so that my eye wants to go right to this area here where the horses are. Now I don't want to, because you have this your profile, your format of your painting is long and narrow. We don't want to not have interesting things happening on the other side of your canvas either. So we do still have a lot happening and going on here, and we do have lights and darks happening, but everything is a little softer and a little more pushed back, a little bit cooler in temperature and so on, so that even though, you know, we've created a little more depth with that. And now see how the horses really stand out forefront, and they are the thing that draws our eye right off the bat. So
yeah, I see that.
Part of that also is strengthening your light source, really deciding where your light source is coming from. Let me pull back here to your beginning. On your original painting here, you have like a really strong light source happening here, like as if the light's coming in here. But when we look at the horses, the light is hitting the horses over here. So we want to be sure, especially when we are kind of recreating or perhaps combining more than one photo source, that we are maintaining the same light source, the same angle and so on of the lighting on each one. So by kind of bringing that, cooling it down a little bit, I tried also in doing that to be able to give a sense that the light is all still coming from this angle. See, it is hitting up here and maybe kind of, you know, catching some of the peaks here, but it's not coming straight down onto it the way that you have on your original painting. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I was seeing the light sources coming straight from above, even on the horses. So
yeah, it is pretty much. Yeah, I will agree with that. I would say it's only slightly coming from the side angle, and the reason I say that is because the way that it is hitting the body here, if it were coming straight down, I don't think you'd have quite as much light hitting on the sides of the horses, but it's pretty close. I mean, definitely it's close, but still, by putting so much light back on here, we are really drawing the eye away from the horses. And if your background is really where you want people to go to, then that's the way you would do that. But if the horses is where you want people to focus on, then you need to not compete with that. And so this is all about just reducing anything that is not within your primary point of focus. And then even to the point of where in reverse, we actually strengthen some
Yeah.
of the areas within the where the horses are standing. I've actually made this a little bit more intense, and maybe a little bit some of the, you know, light contrast and so on the horses a little bit more intense, so that the clouds around the horses, I made those a little bit more. And even this little blue background, even though we've got this sort of misty kind of blue from the mountains kind of stretching out in different areas, I made it just a little bit stronger right here, right around the horses, so that, again, you know, all of that strength focuses me right in on them. And just again, you know, we've got color happening back here. It's not dead, it's not dull, you know, it's not without light, but it's just a little bit neutralized so that it's not competing with the more dramatic colors and value shifts that I've made on the horses. And it's just one way of creating that draw into your focal point.
Yeah, I agree. It looks good. Looks
Yeah.
much better. Yeah.
Painting is beautiful, and you do have a nice style going. And so when I work with Photoshop, it tends to soften the edges and so on, which you do want to work with more lost and found edges, but they don't have to all go blended like how it looks when I do Photoshop. There are different ways, even just to the point of where you can create a lost edge by having the value or the colors so close together on where your two edges meet that they tend to sort of lose the one edge into the other. Other ways, artists sometimes will just do a draw of a brush, and you actually have done that beautifully in this one horse here. So I know you know what I'm talking about here. You've got it right here. That line right there is just gorgeous, the way that you have just pushed that back and lost that side of that horse. And what that does is that makes this part of the horse pull right forward, and it wraps back around, and we just kind of lose this because it's going back into the background. And so you've done a beautiful job on that. Just carry some of that through a little bit more, even like on these areas here where you've got such a strong line. Just take your brush and push through them, you know, a few times to break that down. Is an effective way of doing it. But
Okay.
just so you maintain your style and how it works for you, those are some different ways to do it.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank you. That was really informative.
That was good. Back to the drawing board.
great. Okay. No, you have a beautiful
No,
here, and I am not just saying that. It's a lovely piece.
Thank
So
you.
okay, let me work with one of the other paintings here, and then we can come back. And if you each have, you know, kind of individual questions on your piece or another person's piece, we can go back and answer questions on them. Let's see here. This is another one that was sent in.
and I don't believe that she is here, but she will be watching the recording.
Okay. What I like to do is pull up both the photo reference and the painting, and then I open them up so that they are side by side in the app. And my mouse tends to get a little wild sometimes. I'm not sure why it does that, but suddenly it starts rolling away from me and it won't come back. That's not what I want. It's all aligned here so we can see them both a little better. Okay. And basically, what I want to help bring to you is the ability to do your own self-critiquing. So when you are done or while you're working on a painting, you kind of have a checklist. stand back and how do my values look? How do my colors look? How are my temperatures? And, you know, I want to really stress that to you so that you can learn to see these things and make these corrections for yourself. I think it is really hard to be objective about our own work. We tend to get so emotionally attached to them. And I think also because we are seeing things in comparison as we're working on them. So we may, you know, see, oh, that one shape isn't quite round. So we improve it and we think, okay, that looks so much better, that we don't see that it's still not quite round. You know, that whole process, that whether you're talking the colors, the values, or whatever, every time we kind of tweak a painting and improve it, you know, we're still set on that mindset of it looks better than it did, and maybe we need to still push it even further, and we don't quite see that. So on this piece also, again, working with the values would be my first recommendation on this piece. I did a value. First off, I did a value shift with the actual photo reference that she sent in to me. One of the problems of working with photos for a reference is that they tend to not give you accurate exposures. Even if you are working with a manual adjustment on your camera, it is hard to do. If you get it light enough so that your darks are still retaining all of their colors and their details and their values in them, then your lights are probably going to be all washed out. If you get your lights accurate, then your darks are going to just go so dark that you've lost everything, which is pretty much what has happened here with her photo reference. Take a look particularly at the body and the face of the young man walking with the surfboard, and his face is very, very dark. And so she has painted it that way. But in order to have a more successful and actually accurate painting, you need to go beyond your photo reference. You need to be aware of, recognize, and take your photo reference to another level, because the photos are not going to give you the whole story. They're not going to give you complete accuracy. One way that you can work with a photo to help improve that is to actually take two photos, one with the exposure being good for the darks in the image and the other being good for the lights in your image, and work off from both of those when you're painting to be sure that you are getting the accuracy of the detail and so on that you need. Shadows in photos tend to, and we particularly early in our stages of painting, tend to want to make shadows much darker than what they really are. If you are standing there in person viewing this, that young man walking down that beach does not look like a complete black silhouette, which is close to what he looks like here in the photo reference. So the first thing that I did do was I did put the photo into Photoshop, and I just increased the exposure on her photo so that I could bring in some of the detail and see how much more detail and color that photo actually has in it when you lighten some of those shadows up. So we've still retained the sense of it being sunlit. We still have the shadows. We still have the sense of light and shadow happening in the painting, but now we've got some detail and some color and so on happening within the shadow areas. So, and then I took the photo and I turned it into a grayscale so that I could really get a sense of just what her value structure should be when she changes this over into her painting. And I'm saying her, and I apologize. It may very well be a he. I'm sorry.
It is if she. It is if she.
Okay. So let me go over here now to her painting, and when I turn it into a value structure, you can see several things that are off with that. First off, the most obvious one is this cluster of trees is much, much lighter than what they should be. And what that does is that kind of draws my eye up into those leaves, that foliage of the tree, because it's so busy and she's got so many different light and darks happening in there that I'm just drawn to it. And in reality, the whole patch of that foliage, and I actually think it's needles rather than leaves, are almost one solid mass shape when you break it down into a gray scale like this. And if you squint down, it's almost all one value. So we need to correct the value in that. And then, as I was saying with the young man, clearly the face is much darker than what he should be. We need to get some life up into that. And also bring in a little bit more color into the shadows, because your shadows are not just black. They're not just a darker version even of the local color. They actually have reflected light bouncing around inside of them, and your shadows can be and should be really beautiful. And that's one of the things that I want to see you bring into your work, is creating shadows that are just as interesting as the lighted areas of the painting. And then in the background here, this row of buildings, it actually has two darks, and then her middle value is too light. So you need to get that value. Again, it's all just about working and understanding the values. What happens as we go back in distance is that the contrasts of values are minimized. There, we do not have as strong of a contrast in a distance as we do up close. So these really dark areas that she has put into the building here would not really read right. They'll read better if they are toned down, and so that they push back and move away. So, okay, let's bring it back into the color version here. And we'll bring the photo back also to the improved exposure version. And this is what I worked off from then in making what I suggest as adjustments to the painting. And with it, we have the young man now. Again, he stands out. I actually even added a little bit of intense color here, even though it's not really shown in the photo, but I wanted to draw your attention to him. He is the subject of this painting, and so I want him to have something that kind of draws him out and makes him stand out. So I did put a little bit of intensity in here. I made sure that he still looks like his face and skin is in shadow, but he has some life and some flesh tone to it. I've added a little bit more color into her shadows, areas that are lying down on the sand and in the rocks and so on. But then in the background here, I have made this, see, this has almost now become one solid value. If you squint down, there is almost one whole value all the way through, but I've cooled it off. I've added some blues and some purples in there so that we push it back and give it a sense that it's back in the distance. Again, over water especially, you're going to have a lot of atmosphere happening. So you can use that to your advantage in creating some really nice depth to your painting. So I also softened any sharp edges and so on in that far away distance, because that's another thing that happens as things go away. You're not going to have any sharp, hard lines or edges on them. You're going to want to keep your sharp, hard lines and edges as much as possible focused on where you want to draw people's eyes, because your sharp edges are the things that are going to draw attention more so than your softer edges. So we did some of that. I did make some adjustment also to the composition a little bit. The way that it is initially, and it's a nice image, and it's a nice, it has some real good lead into it. But what has happened is because he's walking this direction, his board is pointing this direction, and all of these lines down on the ground are pointing this direction. I am just flying right off the page here. So I need to do something that brings and holds my eye back into the painting. So I made some shifts on the way that the composition is laid out. I brought this structure up here and made it deeper into shadow so that that kind of blocks my eye. I straightened some of these out a little bit more so that I'm not just pointing a direction. And I even drew some of this down a little bit, and I could even carry that a little further and you know, structuring some other branches or whatever so that they are tending to lead the viewer down into the focal point. Some nice things that she does have happening here is that she does have, you know, certain lines that are leading me, and even the flow of the water is leading me to her subject. So that really is a beautiful thing there. We just need to be sure then that once we're led in there, that we don't just hop right past him and go right on past off the page with it. So again, toggling it here, you'll see some of the differences there. And by toning down the foliage, I also have created almost a framework for him. Now it's kind of like everything arches, and it's almost like he's being sort of sheltered and we're drawn right to him because of the way all of these shapes almost vignette him a little bit. And so that helps bring, again, my focus back right where it needs to be. Another thing that I did, like as with your horses, Kim, I also strengthened just enough. I like to try to do this pretty subtly, but go back in, and so lots of times this is the very last thing I will do with my paintings. When I think it's done, I step back and I go, okay, how can I draw the viewer in to my focal point just a little bit better? And so I'll, you know, bring in a little bit stronger color right in here. And like I said, on his shoulder, I put a little bit of color in there just to really draw him in. I deliberately marked these shadows so that they would lead your eye right towards him, and even, you know, some of the rocks and so on in the directions that they are. So I want everything, again, the waves behind him were lightened up and a little bit more color added into the water back here, so that, again, this area here suddenly has the strongest color, the strongest contrast, and the strongest value shifts. All of those things are tools that we can use, and that's part of that whole self-critiquing thing. You know, how can I make my point of view, my focal point, the message that I'm trying to send, how can I best accomplish that, and have I brought that into my work? Okay.
Great, thank you.
All right. We will move on to the next one.
So with the next one, if this painting is yours and you want to claim it, I didn't know if you wanted it to be said online or not. So let us know. If it's your painting and you want to let us know, let us know.
Hello, Isabel. You just
Hi.
came online. Is this your painting, or should I not ask?
It is. Yeah, no, it's mine.
Okay. It is a nice piece also. I thought all three of these pieces that were shared are very nice paintings, and I always want to be sure that just because I am making suggestions and recommendations, that you don't feel that I am downplaying what you have accomplished with your work. And a lot of it is just, it is subjective, and you've always got to, in the end, as the artist, make the final call. You've got to decide.
And I don't know this one.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. This is just an example that I wanted to use. And the reason that I put this
Okay.
on here at all, and I personally am not even familiar with this artist. I actually got this off from Pinterest, but the artist is uh, Karen Schmidt. And the reason that I put this on there, Isabel, is because you had talked about how you really want to paint animals that have a lot of color to them and that are a little less on the realism side. And I thought that this artist just had handled that so beautifully with, look at all the gorgeous color in this black and white dog, but it's, you know, just got just beautiful color to it. And yet she has used the temperature of those colors effectively to where we still have a nice sense of the volume and the shape of the dog and the natural color. We know it's still a black and white dog. It has not been taken away. So
Right.
I thought that that was a wonderful example. So I hope Karen doesn't mind that I have shared her work. I've given her some publicity here. But now let's see, we'll go ahead and pull up your piece, Isabel, and again, we'll bring it up so that we have both your photo reference and your painting. Your drawing is very nice on it, very, very good. And your values are good. Although again, they're good comparative to the photo reference that you're working with. But again, I think you could get a little more strength in your painting if your values weren't quite so sharp of a contrast. So particularly in some of these areas here where it's really on the photo reference, this is really just a color shift in his fur.
Right.
But when you make it too strong, it almost looks as if it's a fold in his muscle structure or his body structure. So I wanted to see that softened up a little bit so that it doesn't it's reading a little bit more accurately. And that can be a little bit tricky because it is very dark, but this is where you can get a little more creative with working with your color temperature to make those value shifts rather than just going lighter or darker. You can go warmer or cooler and still create that sense of volume and shape, the sense of light and shadow by how you work with your temperatures of your colors. Are you familiar with the term high key painting?
Yeah. And a lot
Yeah.
of my paintings are high key.
Yes. Okay. So you are very aware then. The high key is basically kind of a contemporary impressionistic technique in which all the values are raised to a very high level. There are not any really dark darks in the painting, but yet you still have to maintain a value structure. You still have to maintain the sense of light and shadow in there. But where you do that is you replace all of those dark values with the temperature shift. And so perhaps a cooler temperature as things round away, go into shadow. If you've got a nice light, warm light hitting on it, your lighted areas are going to be warmer in temperature and color. So I think that we could have worked with that a little bit more on this, Isabel, and made everything just feel a little bit softer and create a little bit more of a form and a shape on it. So one of the things, let's see, I did do a value study on this. And as I said, I thought you really, that's the one. Yeah, really had it pretty accurate to your photo. The biggest difference that I do see when I squint down is that you've created a light background to him, whereas the photo reference has a dark. But that's you know, a creative decision that you made, and that is fine. If that, you know, was what you decided you wanted to do. As far as on the elk himself, I think, you know, your values, I squint down and they're really good. Other than that one, I guess you'd call that his flank, wouldn't you,
Right.
maybe? Where that is a little bit, little overpowering, a little too strong. So let's, you know, basically soften that up and see where we go from there. Now see how I have used temperature on here to create those value shifts. So instead of having the really strong lights and darks, I've created warms and cools. He still has all of the same markings to him, but see how now it has become more obvious that that is not actually a muscle or a bone structural shift, but that it's just a shift of coloration in him. I
Right.
deliberately pushed the colors on this because you had expressed that that was something you were very interested in doing. So I took that and really tried to do it a little bolder than, you know, if you were trying to paint a realistic painting, you may not push it as far as I have here, but I wanted to bring in, you know, those colors and create that kind of vibrancy and so on within those shadow areas.
Right.
And even in the background area, you have in your painting, you've actually made your background the most intense part of the painting. And what happens then is that I'm drawn to that area. You've got some beautiful colors in there, and you certainly could use that effectively. But again, as I was saying to Kim, you have to make a decision of what's the important in your painting and what do you want the viewer to be drawn to. Do you want the viewer to see the elk and say, oh, that's a beautiful elk and a beautiful painting? Or do you want me to go down here to these rocks and say, holy cow, those are gorgeous?
Yeah.
Because they are.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's just kind of that. Oops, I got this. That's just kind of that. Making those choices and making those decisions about just where do we want to put our focal point in. And we do that with color, we do that with edges, we do that with contrast. And one thing that I like to do is to really take, I've got the little images here of everybody kind of in the way. There we go. I like to really push the strength of the focal point. So on this image here, now I've got you in the way of my little tools. It's one problem in working with Photoshop on Zoom is that the Zoom things are in the way with the Photoshop or the other way around. Let's see which one are we at? We're at this one. Okay. I actually enhanced his face, and I don't know if you see that too much, and I did try to keep it subtle, but I actually did do that. I made his eye particularly a little bit stronger, and some of the details like around his mouth, his muzzle, whatever that would be, so that see how I can feel his eye looking at me now, because I've kind of minimized the busyness of everything that's going around the rest of the face. And now it's his eye that's just staring at me.
Right.
And when I zoom out, you can really see that that eye is like one of the sharpest things in the whole painting, because to me, that's where that's the story. That's where I go. That's what I want to see. So, by structuring everything else, that eye is the darkest value in that whole painting. It's the strongest contrast. I've got almost a pure white, reflected light in the eye and an almost pure, I hesitate to use the word black, but a pure dark value all around the eye. And that is, even though it's just a small part, that is the strongest contrast in this whole painting now. And the rest of it all, it's softened a lot of your background area, so that and foreground area, so that again, it's not competing with your focal point. It's settles, it becomes less important. And it's still beautiful. I mean, you've still got a lot of more subtle color, and this is kind of a good example too of really pushing and utilizing those grade tones. So then when you put in a stronger, more dominant color, like what I've added in here, and you had some of these in here as well, they feel even richer, even more intense, because everything else around it is a little more grayed down, a little more neutralized. And because you do like to work with those bold colors and so on, I would really love to see you work with some of that, pushing that even further. Do some researching on Pinterest. There's some painters, some animal artists that really push it to where there's one artist that does like bears, and the bears are orange and green and yellow and pink and purple, but yet they still have maintained the shape and the form of them really well. And the key to that is getting your value structure right, and recognizing what the value of each color is, because that you have to hold on to that value structure even when you make that shift over into utilizing the colors.
Mhm. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, I guess I'm not even sure, Karen, what time we've got, where we're
We've
at.
got, you've got 9 minutes left to the hour, but
Okay.
I mean, it's a matter of if anyone has any questions or not.
Yeah,
Does anyone have any questions about the things that we came up with for any of the paintings?
I can pull your painting back up too, if anyone wants to ask something specific and would like to have it back on the screen, let me know.
I would like to know, when you were changing the photos to dark and light, there are so many different adjustments you can make on photos. What ones do you think are most important to make changes in?
Well, I work with Photoshop, and it's a little bit more involved, complicated, and sophisticated than some of your other photo editing programs out there. But they almost all do offer a contrast option on them. And ideally, you need to have a contrast that you can control, dark, medium, and lights, so that you can raise the value of the darks without raising the value of the lights. And so most of your editing programs do allow you to do that. What my favorite way to do it in Photoshop is up under let me see, under image. Okay, I'm in the wrong part here. I can't do that unless I'm under adjustments. There is one that's called shadows and highlights.
Okay, yeah.
And under that, it automatically lightens the shadows if I want them lightened, which is really great. Let me go back to the photo when I do that. Image. I have to be on the right level that I've created here in order to have it work. Shadows and highlights. See how just even by default, the minute that I open that up, it automatically popped it up.
Yeah.
But I can push that even further by doing just the shadow areas, and see how I can really bring some information into those darkest darks there by really bumping it up. Now, if my lighter areas are overexposed and they don't have enough depth to them, I can go in, or enough darkness to them, I can go into the highlights part of this, and I can toggle that and see how all of the lightest areas are being affected by that. And that actually can bring in a sense of detail into lights if they've been overexposed. And then the bottom one tends to bump the color within it.
The saturation, yeah. So
yeah.
when you're looking at that, and I can see how it's useful for getting the details and things, but it does look like it changes the values. So do you still use the original for your value study?
You should. Your painting is what is most important. So you should adjust your values however they are going to work best for your painting and what it is you're trying to say in your painting. No, no one is going to be looking like we are here at your photo and your painting side by side hanging on their wall and going, well, these two don't match. What they're going to look at is, oh, that's a beautiful painting. So to me, a photo reference should be very limited in its uses. I always start with a reference, whether I'm painting plein air from life in the studio or from a photo reference. And I do paint a lot from photo references, but I will just start my painting with the photo reference, and then the photo reference becomes almost unnecessary because now I'm looking at my painting and I'm going, how do I want this painting to look? So if you're looking for something very dramatic and you know you want a really intense, strong contrast, then make it that, even if that's not in your photo. And likewise, if it feels like those contrasts are a little bit too heavy, then lighten them up and tone them down and paint your painting that way. So the bottom line is there is not a right or a wrong. There's just what are you trying to say and what do you want to do in your painting.
Yeah, and that's a big part. What am I trying to say?
Yeah.
Thank you so much to those of you who gave us your paintings to
Yeah,
use for tonight. I've learned a lot from these, and they were all beautiful paintings.
Yes, absolutely. I really appreciated that you sent them in and I had a chance to work with them.
You notice I didn't send you one of mine because I'm not ready.
So you always learn from critiquing, right? Doesn't matter if it's your own work,
Absolutely.
somebody else's work, it's always useful.
Absolutely right. No matter what level of artist you are, which is one, I'll put a plug in here for the Mastrius community. As that is one thing that I think is wonderful because I do think we learn from each other. If I were to put up one of my pieces, you could critique it for me and teach me some things about my work. So it's always great to have that feedback. It's important to have that feedback.
Yeah, and just an invitation to anyone who's watching this, as well as you who are watching it live, and anyone who's watching it after the fact, a reminder that we have a new mentorship group starting on Thursday, May 9th, and it will be running on the second Thursday of every month, and we would love for you to consider joining us. If you have any questions, get in touch with myself or with Mastrius, and we can probably put you in touch with Barbara if you had specific questions as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Karen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah,
All right.
thanks everybody. And thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You
You guys
too.
too, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks.